Hi and welcome to this explosion of lace that is my desk right now. You're seeing the tidy part, you're not seeing what's over there. But I was organizing these fabrics that I used to use for my own lingerie brand. And I thought this was a good excuse to tell you a bit more about that story, how I started my brand and why I eventually closed it. And also to share some advice in case you're thinking about starting your own brand, or maybe you just want to see what goes into starting a brand. So make yourself comfortable and let's see how this story goes. So in case you don't know, I work as a freelance fashion designer and pattern maker, but I started my own lingerie brand several years ago with very little money and zero connections in the industry. And perhaps a bit surprisingly, I decided to close it a couple years ago, even though the brand itself was going pretty well. But before I spoil you the end of the story, let's see how it started. If you watch my other video about how I became a lingerie designer, you know that I started making lingerie and clothes for myself as a hobby, and I started posting pictures of what I made on my Instagram. And pretty soon I started getting comments and messages from people saying that they wanted to buy my garments. So that's what gave me the idea of turning this hobby into a business. But instead of starting right away and telling all those people like, yes, I am selling you this for 20 euros, I decided to wait and educate myself, not just on the pattern making side of all of that, but also on the business side. I wanted to make sure that I created a viable business, and I'm so glad that I did because I ended up creating something that is vital, and I recommend everyone who wants to start a brand or a business of any kind to have, and that is a business plan. So my business plan was actually part of the homework I had to do for the vocational course in pattern making that I took. We had a subject that was more focused on the business side of things and helped me a lot to create this business plan. We had to create this business plan for an imaginary business, but I knew I wanted to make this business a reality, so I took it very seriously. And in the end, I ended up having a pretty solid plan. So what is exactly a business plan? There is a lot of information online about what is a business plan and what goes into it, and it can depend a bit on what kind of business you want to make and also how seriously you're going to take this stage of the business plan. But at the bare minimum, it should include the answers to these three questions. What is your business idea? Who is your target customer? And how much is it going to cost, both for you and for your customer? I recommend everyone to have an answer to these questions, a thoughtful answer, because not having it is a recipe for disaster. I can't tell you how many times I've met with someone who wanted to start a brand, and I've made patterns for them or designs or tech packs or whatever, and then they discovered that not only they couldn't create the collection, they couldn't manufacture the collection, but they didn't even have the money to buy the materials. So don't waste your time and don't waste anybody else's time if you don't have a clear idea of all of this. In my case, the business plan helped me put my idea into more specific terms, and also it made me realize something that every small designer realizes at some point, and that is that you as a small brand cannot compete in price with the big brands that are already there. Big brands can do cheap things because they have much bigger budgets. They can buy the materials in bulk in much more bigger quantities than you would probably be able to afford, so they cost less, and they can also work with factories that have lower prices but require a higher minimum order quantities, and they can do all of that overseas where the cost of labor is cheaper, because doing cheap things costs a lot of money in the beginning. You have to put a very big investment. So usually a small designer doesn't have that kind of money to spend on that. So you're not going to be able to compete on price, but what else are you going to give your customers that nobody else is giving to them? In my case, I decided that what I was going to give my customers was quality and exclusivity. I wanted to work with very high quality materials. I wanted to use the kind of fabrics that couture houses use. And for example, I do have here some of these laces that have been used by Chanel, by Alexander McQueen, by big brands like that, because that was part of my selling point. And also I wanted to make my garments very exclusive, very personalized, and made in a sustainable way. And that meant for me to have a made-to-order approach to productions. So I didn't have any stock garments. I made the garments one by one whenever a customer made the purchase. That meant, of course, that working with very high quality materials, I would have to make that into the price of the product. So my products weren't going to be cheap, but you were going to get something very, very unique. And in turn, all of this helped me narrow down the kind of customers that I was going to attract to. And I know that a lot of brands start saying like, my target customer is like anyone between 25 and 65. And their interests are that they buy clothes. But if you try to make a brand that appeals to everyone, you end up creating a brand that appeals to nobody, because nobody likes the same things. There are small groups of people who like a specific thing, but if you try to make something that is liked by everyone, you end up having kind of lukewarm tea that nobody wants to drink. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just meh, and nobody is interested in that. You have to have a clear direction, and you have to have a clear offer that some people are going to like and some people are not going to like, and that's fine. Like, the goal is that the people who like your product end up buying your product. And in my case, I was making very expensive garments, but my target customers did spend that amount of money because they recognized the value of the things they were buying. They recognized the quality and they recognized the sustainability, the exclusivity, and all of that. Those were things that were important to them, and they were prepared to pay an extra for that because they knew that you cannot get that things cheaply. But anyway, you have to find your target customer. I did find mine, and I also did a lot of research in terms of suppliers and materials and things that I could buy and things that did have very high minimum order quantities that I couldn't buy, and what made sense for the kind of price point and audience that I was focusing on. And that helped me get an idea of the budget that I was going to need, which leads us to the next part of the journey. The budget for your brand will depend a lot on the kind of brand that you're going to create, but you have to have at least an idea of what it's going to cost to start. And with that, I mean the cost of creating the product, like buying the fabrics, arranging the transport of the fabrics to your manufacturing facility, if you have one, paying your manufacturer, and paying your pattern maker or technical designer or whatever else that you hire. And then there are all the other costs that are related to the running as a business, like, for example, registering your business, buying the website domain, hosting the website, hiring all the people you need for the photo shoot, like the model, photographer, makeup artist, doing any kind of advertising campaign if you want, and also, very importantly, all the shipping materials that you are going to need when you ship your products to your customers. And also, like, a million other things that I don't have in my mind right now, but if you start and make a list of that, I will assure you that you will take maybe a couple of hours. And you need to have a good estimation of all this at the beginning, because you need to know if you're going to be able to afford your collection. And of course, all of this is going to affect the final price of your product. So you have to make sure that that final price is within the range of what your target customer is willing to pay. And setting the correct price for your products also includes having a profit margin so that you can continue creating collections and making a living out of your business. In my case, as I didn't have a lot of money to spare, I decided to do a lot of things by myself. And that included not only the designs and the patterns and making the garments, but also creating my own logo, designing my brand identity, and creating my website. The brand identity and the logo seem like a very trivial thing, but it's also something very important because it's going to be the way that you present yourself to your customers. What do you want them to think when they think about your brand? And it's also going to be the way of making your brand recognizable and attract the right kind of customers. So if you know nothing about that, about graphic design and branding and all that, please do yourself a favor and hire a graphic designer. And in terms of the website, I would recommend you a similar thing. In my case, I made my website myself because I chose to use WordPress because it was the cheapest. And I also had a WordPress blog previously, so I was familiar with the platform and I could design my own website with some technical help from my boyfriend, who is a software engineer. So we could create a very professional looking website and not having to pay anything else aside from the hosting. But if you don't know anything about that, I would suggest that you go with a different platform, like for example Shopify, or I think Squarespace also has like a shop feature, because even though these are subscription based, so each month you have to pay in order to have your website up and running, they are way easier to use because you have kind of templates. So I would say that you pay a bit more, but you also get a lot more peace of mind. So maybe that trade-off is worth it for you. Another option that is not necessarily exclusive, you can combine having your own website and this, is to create your own profile in some kind of marketplace like Etsy. Etsy doesn't charge you monthly, but it does charge you for listing your products there, and it also takes a cut on your sales. I think Etsy works well for specific types of product. In my case, it didn't work for mine because the people who are looking to buy things on Etsy are not usually looking to buy expensive luxury lingerie. They are looking to buy different kind of products, usually with a lower price point. But if your brand is targeted to a customer like that, who values like handmade things, maybe a bit like quirky and fun, maybe you can consider if Etsy or some other marketplace, it's a good option for you. Because the good thing about marketplaces like this is that they already have an audience, they already have traffic there, people looking to buy things that ideally are similar to what you're selling. So as I said, I tried to make everything myself in order to save money, but I did spend money on one thing and I was very sure that I wanted to spend the money there, and that was photography. And photography, it's kind of similar to your brand identity, something that a lot of people don't pay much attention to, but it's super, super important because it's also part of the image of your brand, of how your customers experience your brand. So having very low quality photographs usually gives the idea that the product that you're going to get is also lower quality. So don't skimp on photography. Make sure that you find a photographer that understands your brand and understands your vision and creates the pictures in a way that goes well with all of the brand identity that you have created for yourself. And in my case, I was very lucky because after a lot of research, I found an amazing photographer in Barcelona called Beatriz Maldonado and her makeup artist Laia Teixidor, and they were very, very nice and very, very talented and created the photo shoot for my first collection and almost all of the other collections afterwards because I really love their style and their way of working. So if you can find someone like that, book them for any photo shoot for your brand, like forever. So all this takes us to the launch of my brand, of my first collection, which took place around a year or a year and a half after I made my business plan. And this is a normal amount of time to create a brand. You're not going to create a brand in a couple of months. So my first collection was quite small. I made 2 underwire bras, 2 bralettes, and 4 panties. And that, I think, is a good amount of clothes to start with, because when you're starting out, there are so many things that you don't know that if you try to launch with a much bigger collection, you are going to run into a lot of problems. So I recommend that you launch with a small collection, and then you always have time to add more things, to create more collections, collections or to add like small drops every 6 months or something. But in my case, I prefer to make smaller collections and launch once a year. My first collection was inspired by Greek mythology and art, so I put my background in art history to a good use, and the idea was to create a set of silhouettes, a set of designs that were like a modern twist on classic silhouettes that I could keep reinventing collection after collection. As I said, I made the designs, the patterns, and the samples, and then the garments themselves, so it was a lot of work, but it all paid off in the day of the shooting, which was a magical experience to see my designs on a proper model and all the style like very beautifully. So I think I will always remember that first shooting. But as soon as I had those pictures, I started posting on Instagram and uploading them to the website, because my website wasn't even open, my shop wasn't even open, but I was already doing like social media outreach in a way. I was posting and creating anticipation for my launch, and I was also creating awareness of my brand, because if you plan to launch without any kind of advertising or social media presence or something like that, people don't know that you exist. And if they don't know that you exist, they don't know that they can buy from you. So I spent several weeks very focused on Instagram, and I was very strategic with the kind of pictures I uploaded to Instagram and also with the kind of people that I engaged with. And all of that went so well that I got my first order before even opening my shop officially. There was a person who loved one of my sets so much that she made a reservation, and for me that was amazing. And it also shows how powerful it is to know your right customers, because instead of wasting your efforts in trying to get the attention of the people who are not really that interested in your brand, you can be much more specific and target the kind of people who know that they might see the value in your product and are excited to buy from you. So my first collection did well enough. It wasn't a huge amount of sales, but that wasn't also what I was looking for. So I was happy with that. And more importantly, it got the attention of several lingerie bloggers and publications, and they feature my brand in some articles. So that was great because it raised my brand recognition, and it also helped me to get the attention of more people for my next collections. So what happened in the next several years? I continued creating collections, and they were moderately successful, some more than others. And I had a steady amount of orders that I was making each month, and that allowed me to pay myself a small salary. But I ended up realizing a couple of things. First, that doing everything myself was exhausting. I was at the sewing machine like all day, every day, and then I have to do, on top of that, all of the other admin stuff like contacting suppliers, answering emails, updating the website, things like that. So I didn't have any time to create more collections and to be original with my designs and to enjoy the process of creating. That was essentially why I started the brand in the first place. So I was very, very burnt out, and my back ached like a 90-year-old grandma. And then I realized a second thing, and that was that I didn't have more capacity to make more garments. So if I couldn't make more garments, I couldn't grow my brand. And if I couldn't grow my brand, that small salary, minimum wage that I was earning, that was the top. Like that was the most I could aspire to ever, because I didn't have enough hours in the day. So if I wanted to grow my business in any way, I would have to make the decision of externalizing the production. And that meant a very big commitment in terms of money, because you need a big investment to do that. And also in terms of what do I really want to do with this? What do I really want to do with my life as a whole? school. So that led me to have a big thinking session about why I started my brand and what I wanted it to become. I had to ask myself, like, do I want to be a brand, like in capital letters? And do I want to do all the things that a brand does? Things like producing in bulk and having to throw away the garments that don't sell, and also kind of distancing myself from the products that I was creating and from the customers, because I wasn't going to make the products anymore, and probably I wouldn't have the contact with the customers that I was having. Like, I would receive emails whenever a customer got a product and they loved it and they sent me a picture on Instagram, or they sent me an email saying how lovely was everything. And those kind of moments warmed my heart. So externalizing the manufacturing process was also distancing myself from all that. And for me, the answer of what do I want my brand to be was, I don't want it to become that. So my answer to do I want to externalize production and be a brand was no, thank you. I started my brand in order to make the garments in the most sustainable way I could, in order to make beautiful garments that were cherished and used and loved by the customers. And I really believed in the made-to-order model that I had started with. So I didn't want to change all that, because for me it was like changing the soul of the brand. So I started thinking about closing the brand gradually, and then exploring freelancing and working for other brands, because I thought that in the same way that with my own brand I tried to make things in the most sustainable way and in the way that created the highest quality garments, I could help other brands to achieve that. Like, the world is already full of shitty clothes, so if I can make a difference, if I can make some of the brands that I work with create better garments that are loved by their customers and they are used over and over again, that was in a way continuing the journey that I had started with my brand. So that's what I try to do with my work nowadays. And in the end, what did I learn from having my own brand? Overall, I think it was a very positive experience. I don't regret it, like, not for a minute. I think I learned a lot, and I don't mean just about patterns and design. Like, obviously, I learned a lot and I improved my skills in a lot of different ways, and that helps me now with my work with other brands. But also, I learned about a lot of different other things that I had no idea about, like website design and photography and what goes into creating a brand. So now when I work with a brand, I can understand better what are their struggles. And also I discovered some hobbies, like for example, photography. I sometimes had to take pictures for Instagram of my garments. So in the end, I discovered that I really like photography, and now it's something that I do as a hobby. So all of those things that I've learned, I use them now in my job every day. And I also teach them because I teach in a couple of universities to new designers. So I feel very fortunate that I have all this knowledge that I can pass on to them so that they know what they are getting into and they don't make the same mistakes as I made, or that they have a better base so that they can make more well thought decisions when they create their own brands, or they even like work for a brand in the industry. And the same when I do consulting for small brands or for people who want to start a brand. I've been there, so I know a lot of the obstacles that they are going to face, and I can share my experience and share my advice with them. And does all of this mean that I'm not going to make a collection never again? I don't know, because I still have the idea of maybe creating like a small, very, very small collection with very, very limited quantities, maybe once in a while, like once every year, or like maybe like once every couple of years, something like that. Like, I would like to have this creative outlet and not let my brand die. But right now, it's not something that I'm thinking about in the near future. I would love to, but I had a lot to do already. But I like creating in any way that I can. So maybe now I can put all that creative energy, not just in my work, but also in my hobbies. And I think in the end, I have achieved a better life-work balance because I didn't have that. It was all work and no life. So that is the story of my brand. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I hope you found something interesting in all that. If you have a brand yourself, write down in the comments what's your experience, because I love to know. And if you are looking into starting your own brand and have questions, also write them in the comments or get in touch with me, because I would love to talk more about all this. And for now, have a lovely rest of your day and see you soon in the next video.